BMW 435i versus M4, which one is right for you? Let's get right into it. The BMW 435i is powered by the N55 inline-6 turbocharged engine, and the BMW M4 and M3, the F80 generations, are powered by the S55 twin-turbo inline-6. Now, to begin, like I was saying, this is a much closer comparison than comparing something like a twin-turbo 6 or a turbocharged inline-6 to a V8 motor. The motors in the F-Series generations are more similar in terms of performance and I would say kind of overall design than they are in the E90 generation. Let's talk about the 435i for a little bit. So the 335i and 435i from the F30 generation is a pretty damn solid car, especially with the M Sport package. It handles pretty well out the box. The N55 is a strong motor, makes good power, and overall, paired with the ZF8 gearbox, that transmission is like ridiculously quick. It's almost like a DCT in the sense of how quickly that thing can shift and how it can just kind of bang through gears, let's say. So out the box, the 435i is a really solid car. However, it is a little bit limited by power. It only makes around 300 horsepower, 300 torque, and I believe with certain options, you could actually fit the 435s and 335s with a factory limited slip differential. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that was an option, and that is a huge thing, especially because in the E9X generation, BMW never really offered a limited slip. And given the nature of these types of cars, rear-wheel drive performance sports coupes that have, you know, around 300 horsepower or more, a limited slip is kind of something that's a necessity when driving, especially if you're serious about performance. Now, from a tuning standpoint, the N55 is also a really strong motor. A simple JB4 tune, some bolt-ons and whatnot can bump the power up to like 360, 370 wheel horsepower. You could be making around 430, 440 pound-feet of torque, which is a lot of power, and at that level, you're pretty much up there with like a stock M4, stock M3, if not quicker. And on top of that, the N55 has a really good sound. It's a very unique sound, and that is definitely not a bad thing because it sounds amazing. I think the majority of people can agree that the N55 has a really nice inline-6 turbocharged sound, especially with the M Performance exhaust. If you throw on a catless downpipe on there too, you can really wake it up, and it just sounds really sweet. Let's get into the F80, M3, and M4 generations. So the M4, like I said, is powered by the S55 twin-turbo inline-6. It makes around 425 horsepower and 404 pound-feet of torque, I believe, if it's the non-competition package. And overall, the M4 is a very fast car out the box. Keep in mind, I have driven both the 435s and the M3 M4s. I've driven tuned ones before, and let me tell you, the S55 is not a slouch by any means. It actually, in my opinion, is the closest thing to the N54 in terms of the way that it feels and the way that it kind of puts you back in your seat when you're driving it, especially compared to like an N55 or something. The S55 pulls really hard. Now, obviously the M4 has a better chassis balance, it has better suspension out the box. The S55 is also a pretty damn strong motor from the factory, especially given the fact that it is a closed deck design. The amount of coolers that it has from the factory to kind of manage heat. Don't quote me on this, but I believe that the turbochargers on the S55 are twin scrolls as well, even though it is a true twin turbo setup. And out the box, like I'm saying, the M4 is fast. It feels significantly quicker than a 335 or a 435. I mean, given the fact that it should, but it just simply is. And on top of that, if you're into the performance or aftermarket upgrading scene, the S55s have a ton of power out of the box. The S55s can build a ton of power for relatively cheap, simply throwing on a Boot Mod 3 off-the-shelf tune or something like a JB4, catless downpipes, and you're pushing, you know, close to like 500 wheel horsepower. Throw some E85 on there, now you have a wicked fast car. add pure turbos, now you're looking at 650 wheel horsepower. It's really easy to build power on the S55. The only thing is that it has been known that some of the S55 motors suffer from crank hub slips, and it seems like that is on like pretty high powered cars, although it is fairly uncommon. It's not like every M3, M4 has that issue. It is something to, you know, note, whereas the N55 for the most part is kind of relatively bulletproof, as long as you're keeping up with the overall maintenance on it and not pushing ridiculous power. What's the better car? Well, obviously the better car is going to be the M. In terms of overall driving feel, handling, power delivery, the M3, M4 is the superior car, and there's no doubt about that. It should be the superior car given its significant price increase over something like a 435i. The only drawback to the M cars, in my honest opinion, the sound isn't that good. The twin turbo 6 from the S55 isn't that great, and I'm going to be really honest about that. But compared to something like an N55, the N55 definitely sounds a lot better. And then when you compare it to the previous generation's S65 V8, well, there really is no comparison in terms of sound. So as a BMW enthusiast myself, what would I personally go for? Well, of course, I would go for the M car, the M3 or M4, but we have to talk prices. And in terms of like used prices, now the 2015 M4s and 435i's have been around for a few years now. Depreciation has kind of taken its toll, and I really think that's probably the smartest segment to purchase in, is kind of the secondhand buyer's market. You can pick up a 435i for, you know, the mid to upper $20,000 range, which is pretty good considering the performance and what you can do with that car out the box. Whereas M3, M4s, you're really not going to be able, at the time of this video, you're really not going to be able to find them anything less than like 40 grand, you know, at the very minimum. So there is a significant price difference between the two, and when you really factor it, $25,000, let's say, compared to like $45,000, is it worth the $20,000 price gap to get the M car? It is kind of negligible. It really just depends on what you want. It just depends on the type of driving and performance capabilities that you're looking for. In certain situations, given the context, yes, it is. If you're looking to keep your car relatively stock and you just want a daily driver, then a 435i is probably going to be, you know, more than sufficient for you. If you're just looking for a strong performance car, one that looks incredibly amazing, it has a ton of performance capabilities in the aftermarket segment, then yeah, the M is probably going to be the way to go if you're just really strictly about performance. The other thing that I forgot to mention is that in terms of visual looks, the M3 and M4 look significantly more aggressive than something like a base 3 Series 335i or 435i. And that's definitely something that would play a factor in my choosing if I was to be purchasing one of those cars. And given something like the M3, how wide the rear fenders are, how much more beefy the entire car looks as an overall package, the kind of bulge in the hood and just the way that the lines work on the M3 and M4, they do look significantly more aggressive, and they do have a really striking design on the road. So that definitely plays a role as well. You can't really get a 3 Series or 4 Series to look like that. Anyway guys, I know I didn't really come to a consensus in this video, but I just kind of wanted to lay out the differences as well as just kind of give like an overall comparison between the two cars. Now, of course, in a perfect world, I think everybody would choose the M car. I think that's fairly obvious, but obviously pricing definitely plays a role. And like I said, given the kind of striking price difference between the two cars, it really comes down to obviously what you can afford, and also is it worth kind of that, you know, extra price jump on an M car versus something like a 435i, given the performance of the two already out the box. So if you guys found this video informative, be sure to give me a thumbs up as well as subscribe to my YouTube channel, Simply Car Things. Expect in the near future a full review where I'm actually driving the two cars and comparing them with the actual cars by my side. I'd really like to do a video like that in the near future where instead I'm not just like talking in front of the camera. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Have a good one.